Here are the propeller blades, and you can see they're flat. They've been cut out, they've been edge trimmed or edge painted with some marker, brownish marker, and they're ready to put together. So these, I'm going to show how that works. They're kind of, they're not difficult, but you got to play with them, and you're using different types of different rounded things. There's a file that's rounded, and all I'm doing is trying to make these look like they got dimension. They got a sort of curl. The danger with these is making them flat. You don't want them just to be a flat piece of paper glued together. That little tail is going to be rolled around because that's going to be where it's going to fit into the hub of the spinner. But both of these need to be rolled, and I use different little implements to do that. And I'm trying to roll them so that the base has a pretty semicircular profile, and the edges are just rolled out and around, and we're going to end up putting glue on the edges and trying to glue them together as best we can. See, down at the base, I'm getting a smaller piece. I'm trying to roll that, putting a fair amount of pressure. You can see my fat little finger turning white. That has to come around because that's going to sort of match up to the other side of the blade, and that definitely has a round base to it. That's where this piece here is going to go. So I'm trying to make that base nice and round, and then I'm going to start rolling that piece, and that piece is again going to be rolled all the way around so that it becomes part of the hub. And you can see I'm starting to roll that, and rolling it is not hard. But you roll it all the way around. Again, and in this case, these are interesting props because see that little line right there? That's, I assume, means you roll it around until you come up to that line again. So that's how small the curve has to be. So I grabbed it with a pair of tweezers and roll it in my hand. My fingers are rolling, so I'm moving my right hand around until that black line lines up right there on the edge of the front of the prop blade. That's what I assume happens. But yeah, these prop blades are different in that they are hollow. Usually there's something inside, like a couple rolls of paper or a wire or a toothpick, something. And so I was dubious if these were going to work. In hindsight, they worked really well because one thing I don't like about having an internal part to a propeller that basically isn't the whole shape of the propeller is that when you glue it, you see the skeleton underneath, and it looks dumb having what looks like a toothpick in the middle of your prop blade, and it's because it is a toothpick in the middle of your prop blade. So this worked out very well, ultimately in the end, but I'm just practicing making sure it rolls around where it's supposed to go. And then once I've done that a few times, then we're going to apply some glue just to the edge, show where that's gonna just put it right up to the edge of where that black line is, and a little on the inside, and then grab that tail with the tweezers and roll it, and that's gonna then get it into position. So I roll this all the way around, and then I push it down and press it so that there it's lined up with that black line on that other edge of the prop at the base. And so I hold it for a few seconds to make sure that it starts to take, which it does, and make sure that it's gluing together, holding it together, taking off some excess, and that's going to be the part that's going to form the piece, as I said, that goes into the spinner. So now what you got to do is play with this a little bit because you got to now test fit the other blade. Now, one of the blades I made didn't fit well at all. It was one was the sides didn't seem to match, and I guess that's because I had that base wasn't rolled quite right. This one ends up fitting really pretty nice. I just butted up there, and now I'm holding it up against, trying to hide all the white, and you can see the tip is going to actually fit. Another thing on these, if you watch the video, the tips have a couple of extra pieces that are supposed to be cut, I think, to kind of roll over the tips. I didn't bother because I wanted to see if it worked without it. In my opinion, you didn't need those relief cuts. I think it worked just fine. I guess user abilities, or not abilities, just your mileage may vary depending on what you want to do. So all I'm doing now is very carefully, kind of laboriously, lining these up and trying to make sure that they're going to match, and I'm not going to have any white showing through on either side, and that when I put glue on the edges, I'm leaving that shape because I do not want to flatten that. You don't want dips in there. You want to make sure there's a nice shape. So in this case, I think I need a little more curving around at the base, and I think I need a little bit more around the edges as well, just to roll it. I could use different tools. I could use my little dabbing tools. I could use these. I found with the dabbing tools, at least one of the blades that I made, when I use the dabbing tool, I end up crinkling the paper. So when you look at the prop blade, it actually has little fine creases all along the outside, horizontal creases go on the leading and the trailing edge of the blade. And I think that's because you're as I'm rolling that thing along, I'm actually creasing it, and it's making a good shape. But then I think the prop blade looks kind of silly with these lines on it. So I tried to make it just with these curls around very specific places with those long cylindrical tools. Seem to work better in my opinion. So when I got it where I think it should work, now I'm gonna grab some glue, and I just put it on the very edges of everything, trying not to get it in the middle. I don't want it to get stuck in the middle. I just want it to touch the very edges, and sort of then I'll use my fingers to kind of hold it in place and roll it around. And I put it all on at one time. You could glue like the tip first and then go down and do more and more and more. I found this worked okay because I could sort of cradle it with my fingers. Maybe you'll see when I'm doing this. You put it in and the glue starts to hold, but see how I'm kind of holding on either side with my fingers and pushing down. Very carefully though. Notice I'm not pushing in the center. I'm just trying to get the edges to start to tack. And sometimes I use a little bit of pressure, of course, to get it down there, but I do not want to lose that middle shape to the prop. And if there's a little bit of white showing, it can be touched up with paint or a marker later. It's not the end of the world. You just don't want air to show through, especially at the base. That gets harder because you want to make sure the base actually closes. I mean, you could putty it and stuff, but then you have to repaint the whole blade. And I'm trying on this model to leave it as the designers had it as much as I can. I've done a couple of things and mistakes I've made to repaint, of course. But in terms of how it goes together, I'm trying to make it just as they designed it. And so far, that's been pretty dang good. So yeah, there's an opening, but I got to just sort of squeeze that shut. And I end up, I think, in this case, adding a little more glue. So I'm just trying to tweak it, but I'm just grabbing the very edge. I'm hanging on by my fingernails over there because I do not want to smash it. Putting in some glue, and then very carefully tweaking that edge close and basically holding it there until it starts to take. One other thing I've noticed using this glue, it's not like it's a filler, but if you have something that's a space, that's an actual gap, and you put some of that white glue in there and you wipe it smooth, somehow when it dries, I guess it's because it dries clear, but there's a density to it. It plays a trick with the light so that it actually fills up the area and looks pretty good. You don't see it as an opening anymore. And I think that's just because of the way the light and the color dances off of it, and that it actually forms this little fillet in there. I've done that on like air scoops and stuff that go to fuselage sides and things. It actually looks pretty good. So anyway, that is the blade. And you can see it wasn't that hard to put together. But I'm glad they're over. I'm glad they're done. And the next thing to do will be just to go ahead and plug these into the spinner, make sure they're at the right angles, glue them, and that's pretty self-explanatory. You just pop them in, and you just got to take the time to make sure they come out even and they're all at the right angles. But there they are. Okay, so I did a few things off camera recently that I want to show you. One is making this little camera. These things I did off camera were actually very easy to do, so I figured I'll just do them and show you the finished product. This little guy was easy to put together. This is basically a teardrop shaped little camera. There's a strap that went around it. You folded it and glued it together, no problem. The hardest part was under here. There's a little stand with a couple of that little guy and that little guy, which are just rolled pieces of paper. that ended up right on some nice demarcation lines that were on the surface of the wing, and turned out nice. I have to put on the tippy top, I have to put a little, where that light spot is, there's a little like a shark fin looking thing that goes up there I have to add. And the only additional thing I did, I don't think you can tell, but on the lens, I'm going to show you this. On the lens of the little camera, that I just removed, I put a little drop of like Tester's window maker, and that gave it a shiny appearance, so it looks like a piece of glass in there. Don't think you can tell, but anyway, that was something I did without telling you. Another thing I did without telling you was I added the tail wheel. Now the tail wheel was very easy to put together. It's just got a couple of pieces in there. It's got that yoke, it's got a wire in it, and it's got a little boot on the base. The one thing I did differently was the wire that's in there, I was a little dubious of that little yoke being strong enough, so I extended the wire into the tire itself. So I drew a tiny hole in the tire and put the wire up into it. So now that's nice and strong. And then the last big thing I did, which I didn't bother showing you, was I made my wheels. Okay, the wheels are very easy to make. All they were a bunch of sandwiched pieces of cardboard sandwiched together, and then they make like a stair step look to them once they're done. And then I sanded them with a sandpaper, just a block of sandpaper, and got them round-ish. I did flatten one portion so that they sit flat on the ground and look more like an actual, like the airplane's got weight. And then there were a couple of pieces on the hubs, and that piece that you see there with the little cuts in it, that's very ever so slightly convex, but not a lot, like a dinner plate. But they all went together very well. There's a teeny weeny metal pin axle that fit inside, and though the wheels are on and they're great. So that's the other thing I did without telling you. And then after making the props, the blades, I went ahead and added them to the spinner, and it makes it look much nicer. One thing I would do differently is you got to make sure that they are bent the right angle into the wind. I'm assuming that this airplane, the propeller, would spin that way, and so it's going to grab the wind and force it back. So you put them on like that. But I would have, if I was smart, left the spinner off and added these on the spinner off the airplanes, because then it could have really got these angles exactly right. This is all done with the Mark I eyeball. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And the only additional thing, if anybody knows how to do this, these are separate blades, and they look fine. They look great. There's nothing wrong with them. But there's no helix to them. They're supposed to be at the base, and then they're supposed to turn as they go to the outside. And there's no real easy way to do that. The other thing about these prop blades, which showed you on that little video before, was that they're unusual in that there's nothing inside them. They're hollow. And that was kind of strange, because that's an unusual thing, I think, for some of these, at least larger airplanes. But there it is, looking pretty good. Bunch of things to do yet. I've got to add machine guns to these. We've got to add a pitot tube out here. We've got to add bombs. There's a sight that goes here. There's a sill that goes along here on the side of the cockpit. Of course, the cockpit itself. I made the gun mount, which was very easy to make, but now I got to make the gun. And then I got to make the exhausts, which go in there. And I started to make them, and I'll show you later. They're kind of silly. They don't fit well, at least as far as I can get them to fit. And so what I'm going to have to do is, I looked at some pictures of the real airplane, and I'm going to sort of dawdle with my own. I'll show you in a video, figure out how to make those work better. But overall, it's looking pretty cool. It's nice to see it on its own feet. One thing I forgot to tell you about the wheels, you can kind of see a little bit of powdery, tannish, reddish brown on them. That's just pastels. So these wheels, once I sand them to the right shape, I gave them about, I don't know, 5 coats of primer, automotive primer, and sanded in between, and then painted them, and then I dusted them with a little bit of pastel to make them look a little dirty, and like they're actually gonna, they're in the field. So that's the only additional thing I forgot to tell you. That's what I did for the wheels. Alrighty, so I was going to show you putting in these exhausts, but they ended up being rather a pain to do. As designed, they're way too big, they're way too long, and they don't fit into the hole very well. So I cut them down a lot and cut them so that they would stick out, I think, the way they're supposed to based on pictures of the real airplane. And so I think they look, they don't look too bad. What I have to do, though, is go in with some paint and give the inside a little dollop of color, because, black I guess I'm going to use, simply because there's a lot of color showing through, and so what I'm going to do is just go in here and take my paintbrush with some black, and I'm just going to go in here and give the base a little shot of black, because I want to look in there and not see any kind of color or not see any cardboard or whatever. So I'm doing that because otherwise I think it'll look kind of dumb. It's not horrible right now, but it definitely needs to be touched up in there a little bit, I think. By the way, these tubes are also, the paper tubes that I use to cut this thing that I use to make them. I also colored the insides black to sort of make it so that they actually look like the insides of some kind of an exhaust with soot and stuff on them and things. So that's fine. I also did this ridiculous tiny little shark fin on here. You can't even see it. It's silly. This is just black paint I'm using to sort of touch up a few things. It's just amazingly tiny and kind of goofy in my humble opinion. So I'm just giving this a little shot of paint here and there. Now, something we should do is start putting on some little bits and bobs to finish this thing. It's getting close. And one of those bits and bobs are the machine guns that go there. So what we're going to do is try to make some machine guns for that. And should be easy. They use wire. I'm going to use stretched sprue. And what I'm going to do is I locate where the little piece is, where the gun's going to go, and I take an X-Acto blade and I poke a little tiny hole where it's going to be in the center as best as possible. Then I came back with something that was pointy and shoved it in that hole and basically rolled it around until I basically ended up with the area sort of removed that's going to be where the barrel's going to go. And then the inside of that is white now. So then I took a skinny little marker like this, and I went in and I push in like this and sort of roll it around. And now the inside is black. And so it's kind of hidden. It kind of makes it, I think it's going to work just fine. Okay. Now I am going to stretch some sprue rather than use wire, because I can make this be a certain thickness I want, and I think this will be fine. I can figure out how big should these be. based on the pictures I've seen, this might be a little bit thin. You know, they aren't. They were. Well, yeah, that's too thin. I want them a little bit bigger than that. I could use wire, which is fine. That's definitely a possibility. But let's try to do it again. Let's do it with a little more finesse here. Let's let it get soupy, and then let's not pull it quite yet. And then let's slowly pull it. I want it to be a little thicker. Just a little bit, because I want it to be, that's more like it, I think. I think that's a little bit thicker, just a tiny bit. They're not huge guns, I don't believe. They're not massive or anything, but they are, they're definitely, they stick out little ways and stuff, and we're just going to end up putting them directly in those holes and just gluing them in like that. Okay. So now, how big do you want them? Well, how big should they be? Maybe to about there, I'm guessing. They're not super huge. So what I'm going to do is cut this right about there. Then I'm going to try and drill this out. So you don't have to do this. This is kind of an exercise in stupidity. But I'm going to try to take a little drill bit here and try desperately to drill this out. I'm going to take one a little bit smaller than that. Maybe this one's tinier. You start it with a little tiny drill bit into the center and just slowly push and slowly turn, and you'd be amazed. You do this a couple of times, you should end up with a little hole. Now, this is a detail no one's going to notice, no one's going to care. It's one of those you'll know it's there kind of things. But if you do this a few times, the more you do it, the more the plastic is coming out, and you will actually end up with a nice little hole. This can be done with an X-Acto blade. You don't need to have an eensy-teensy-weensy little drill bit. You honestly don't. Now, I'm at a handicap positioning here because I'm doing this through a camera from 6 feet away. Feels like it. And usually I do this with my little optivisors on, so it may or may not be perfect. But do you see that there's a hole in the barrel? I don't know if you can see that, but there is one right there in the tip. And if I look in there, and I think when I paint it and stuff, and I do a little bit of dry brushing, you might even see the hole. So I'm going to do this as much as I dare. You got to go in straight. You got to go in carefully, because otherwise it's not going to look good. But that, to me, actually looks like an eensy-teensy-weensy gun barrel. You can see there's a hole in there. And I could go a little bit bigger, but I'm not gonna. I think that is just fine for that size. So I'm just gonna make sure it's cleaned out as best I can. Not too bad. Now, all you do then is take your glue of choice. I'm guessing that our Aleene's tacky glue will probably work just fine, even though this is plastic. I don't think that's going to be a huge problem. So I'm going to take a little blob of the tacky glue. I'm going to put a little bit inside there, just a little. And I'm going to take my little gun. I should put the right end in. Yeah. I'm going to stick this in there. and I'm going to make sure I have it level. Like right now, it's pointing down. I want to point down. Oops, shooting around a corner. That looks good. That looks good. We are going to leave them at that, let that dry, and come back and paint it. We'll do the other side the very same way. Okay, I redid these a little bit. I made them a little more, a little thicker, a little bigger caliber looking. These look more like, you know, I don't know, John Wick as opposed to Peter Pan. So I think these are better. I think these look a little bit better. All I'm going to do is let them dry in there, and then I will paint them little metallic gray or metallic black, and those will be those guns out of the way. So the next thing we maybe will do is, we got to figure out how this sight goes on. I'm not sure about that. But maybe what we'll do for fun is build the rear machine gun, because that will give it a little bit of character back there. And then we'll work on some bombs and stuff like that. But let's call it quits for now, because now we've got a fair amount done. Next, like I said, we'll do the sight, we'll do the bombs, we'll do the rear gun, and that'll be almost all the armament done. And then all we'll have left really is the canopy. So, boy, things are looking up.